I'm willing to bet that most of you did not suspect you would have to revisit your days of English lit this morning. And particularly if you did not care for William Shakespeare, buckle up. Because in reading today's gospel, I could not help but think of one of the Bard's more famous productions, Romeo and Juliet, a tale of two star-crossed lovers who, because of who they are, can never enjoy a life together. For Juliet is Capulet, Romeo a Montague, the Italian Renaissance equivalents of the Hatfields and McCoys. There is simply no way for these two to be together. Their families would not allow it. And the drama of this situation is, of course, leveraged to great effect by Shakespeare. And he gives Juliet this wonderful soliloquy wherein she hits the nail on the head for what is the source of her problem. And in this soliloquy, she asks the question, what's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. She basically says, what's in a name is stuff that we put in it. The rest of it doesn't matter. I would still love Romeo if he was Romeo Smith. But because he's a Montague, because of what we put on that name, we cannot be together. Now, Jesus had 1,500 years head start on Shakespeare. For in today's gospel, we have a story where we get the same effect. What does it matter? What's in a name? In the gospel account, I picture John running up to Jesus and like a sibling telling on another sibling, running up to mom and dad, tugging, saying, Jesus, Jesus, this guy's over here casting out demons in your name, but he's not one of us. I think the expectation of John was that Jesus would make the person stop. Cease and desist. Copyright violation. You are not part of me. Cut it out. And instead, Jesus shrugs. Says, okay. They're still casting out demons. Kingdom work is still being done. Let them continue. I can only imagine the crestfallen look on John's face when yet again the disciples are left holding their own frustrations and Jesus reminding them, you're focusing on the wrong thing. And I can only imagine that Jesus' frustration was compounded by the fact that just a moment before, on the road, as they're walking, the disciples have their argument in Mark as to who among them is the greatest. And Jesus calls in a young child front and center and reminds them that they're focusing on the wrong thing. They're putting the emphasis on the wrong name, the wrong label. And then we shift gears. As soon as Jesus has this moment with John, he offers up some teachings about stumbling blocks. Some interesting things to note here as we talk about stumbling blocks. Our word for scandal comes from the Greek word for stumbling block. Don't scandalize the little ones. Don't cause them to stumble because they're shocked or horrified. And in a commentary that I was listening to, one of the people far smarter than I am noted that the stumbling block was also used interchangeably in some ancient texts for a hunting snare. And I envision the Hanna-Barbera or Looney Tunes style rope on the ground that the animal runs through and then it cinches on the leg and then voila, you've got them hanging in the tree upside down. A hunting snare, which is a far more sinister image. Because while a stumbling block might be something that you inadvertently leave behind you, hunters set traps with the intent to capture and to make a meal out of their prey. Don't entrap little ones. Don't set traps for others. And in trying to think about how this gospel reading from Mark connects to us today, I think we're left with a pretty powerful reminder of a stumbling block that we face in our society. We, too, are focused and fixated on labels. We, too, spend too much time discounting or denying the work of others because they're not wearing our jersey. They're not flying our flag. I'm a Democrat, they're a Republican. I'm a Tennessee fan, they're a Florida fan. That was hard. Name the two sides. Name the opposing forces. It's very easy to slip into. They vote differently from me. They love differently from me. They vacation differently from me. All the ways that we categorize people. And we can't help it. We do it. We do it all the time. And for me in particular, two instances just in the past 48 hours have really brought this home for me. My grandfather died yesterday, and after a long illness, and it was a blessing for the family to be able to hand him over, knowing that his suffering is now over. But in the 48 hours leading up to that, I had the opportunity to be with him and to pray over him and to offer the Episcopal Church's prayers at the ministration at the time of death. And it was really powerful. But before I got to that, I walk into the hospice care center in Chattanooga and pull the curtain aside to room 602, and there's my grandfather, and there's my mother and my grandmother. And then there are these two men I recognize as the ministers at my parents' church. They go to Red Bank Baptist. And I see them, and we had this kind of awkward moment where I walk in, and I feel like the sheriff who kicks in the saloon doors, and there are the two men I've been looking for. And it's sort of a whose blessings are we going to sling fastest? I admit it. It was a cordial conversation, and I was there for the prayer, and it was wonderful and beautiful and what we needed. And then later that night, I had gone back to my grandparents' house, and a bunch of the family had gathered, and my grandmother had said goodnight and goodbye to my grandfather for the night and had come home. And so we were all there, and the phone rings, and it is my grandmother's sister-in-law, my grandfather's sister, who is a former Roman Catholic nun. And she had called to ask if the family would like for her to contact a priest to come and administer what they no longer call it extreme unction, I can't remember the name, but to administer the Roman Catholic Church's last rites. And the way that she was describing it, my grandmother wasn't following. And so she asked, well, my grandson is an Episcopal priest, can you talk to him? Sure. Now, I unfortunately have not met this woman, and this is the first time I've ever spoken to her. And so we talked out what I offered. And she was immediately put at ease, but she had this concern that the prayers that she thought necessary weren't being offered by the community of faith that my grandfather was in. And so we talked through it, and I explained to her the prayers that I had prayed, and she felt more comfortable at that point having that liturgical framework for her brother to walk through in his final hours. But it makes me realize how much we participate in the doubting and suspicion and dismissal of others because they're not with us. How easily it is for me, an Episcopal priest, to, as I ponder what it will be to co-officiate a burial with a very smart, very capable Baptist minister, and wonder, is he going to do a good job? Because it's not our prayers. And being called out by Jesus today. Is kingdom work being done by those two men? Yes. Was kingdom work being done when my grandmother invited me to pray those prayers? Yes. Is kingdom work being done by people here in Knoxville, around the state, around our country, around the world, by people that we might at first blush dismiss because they're not one of us? Yes. We too join in John's frustration because we want so badly to be the ones doing it the right way. But in typical Jesus fashion, he responds with a radical inclusivity to say, it's not just you alone that bears God's image. It's not just you alone who has hands that God can use. And we chafe against that. We're frustrated by that because we want so badly to be able to be the ones who are doing it the right way. When what Jesus is inviting us all to is to have eyes to see, ears to hear, and arms and hearts open to see the various myriad, strange, beautiful ways in which God does kingdom work in and through others, even if not through us all the time. We are called to stop worrying about who's a Hatfield and who's a McCoy, who's a Montague and who's a Capulet, who is us and who is them. Jesus is demanding that we stop putting the stumbling blocks and snares in our way and in the way of others because we're so concerned that it be us that win the race. And instead, Jesus is asking us to just be for him, to be with him, and to be working with others in the task of kingdom work. Amen.